This is the story of something that happened during spring break. I'm going to tell you exactly how it went down because I still can't get it out of my head. It happened to a group of college students. 5 of them. They weren't strangers. To me. One of them, Katie, was my cousin. She was fun, bold, always laughing. She never believed in anything paranormal. She thought everything had a logical reason. But after what happened, let's just say no one in our family ever talks about spring break the same way. So, Katie and her 4 friends, Liam, Tara, Josh, and Natalie, decided to take a road trip for spring break. Nothing fancy, just a small cabin in the woods near a lake. It was cheap, far from crowded places, and they figured it would be peaceful. They could swim, drink, play music, and chill without anyone bothering them. They reached the cabin on a Wednesday afternoon. The sky was clear, birds chirping, wind calm. The place was old but cozy. Wooden floors, a fireplace, even an attic. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, but they liked the idea of disconnecting. At first, that night, they lit a bonfire by the lake. They laughed, told stories, and shared drinks. Around midnight, Liam said something strange. He said he thought he saw someone standing between the trees, watching them. But when they looked, there was nothing, just shadows. Trees can play tricks on your eyes at night, right? They brushed it off. The next day, they went hiking. Tara kept hearing footsteps behind them like someone following. But again, when they looked, no one. Still, they felt uneasy. Katie said she felt like the forest was too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no movement. Just silence and trees. That night, something weird happened. They were playing cards in the cabin. Josh got up to grab snacks from the kitchen. A minute later, they heard a loud crash. They rushed in and found Josh standing there, pale and shaking. The plate had slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. He swore he saw someone standing, behind him in the reflection of the window. A tall figure, standing still, just outside. But when they checked, no one. Now things started to feel off. The next morning, they woke up to find scratches on the front door. Deep, uneven marks, like someone or something had used claws. At first, they thought maybe it was a raccoon or some wild animal. But the marks were too high up, about 7 feet from the ground. They locked the doors and windows from then on. But locking the doors didn't stop what came next. On the 3rd night, Natalie woke up screaming. She said someone had whispered in her ear while she slept. A deep, raspy voice that said, "I see you." They tried to calm her down, said maybe she had a nightmare, but her hands were shaking so badly, she dropped her phone trying to show them the time. It was 3:03 a.m. Later that night, Liam had to use the bathroom. It was an outhouse, just a few steps from the cabin. He took a flashlight and went out alone, but he didn't come back. After 10 minutes, Katie got worried and went out to check on him. She found the outhouse empty. The flashlight was on the ground, still glowing. They called out for him, over and over. No answer. Then they heard a scream. It came from deep in the woods. They couldn't tell if it was Liam or not. It didn't sound human. It was high-pitched, broken, like something in pain, or mocking pain. They ran back into the cabin and stayed awake all night. In the morning, they searched for Liam. They found his footprints leading into the woods, but they stopped suddenly, like he vanished into the air. No drag marks, no other footprints, just gone. They wanted to leave, but Tara's car wouldn't start. They tried everything, but it was dead. And with no cell signal, they couldn't call for help. That night, the worst happened. They sat in the cabin, all of them clutching knives, and anything they could use as weapons. At around 2 a.m., the front door slowly creaked open. No wind, no reason, just opened by itself. Standing there was Liam. But something was wrong. His eyes were blank. He was soaked, covered in dirt. His head tilted slightly to the side, and he didn't say a word. Katie ran to hug him, but Tara screamed at her to stop. "That's not him," she said. "Look at his hands." They looked. His hands were too long, his fingers stretched, sharp at the tips like claws. Then he smiled. But it wasn't Liam's smile. It was wide, too wide, and his teeth looked pointed. The lights flickered and went out. Screams, chaos, footsteps. Something grabbed Tara. Natalie shouted. Josh tried to fight whatever it was, but was thrown across the room. Katie managed to light a lantern. The cabin was wrecked. Furniture overturned. The front door wide open again. And Liam, or whatever he was, gone. Tara was missing. Josh was unconscious. Natalie was curled up, crying. That's when Katie saw it. A message was scratched into the wall. It wasn't there before. It said, "You brought spring, now you stay." The next morning, Katie and Natalie carried Josh out of the woods. They walked for hours until they reached a gas station. They called the police. The search team went back with them. They found the cabin, but no one else. No sign of Tara, no sign of Liam, no scratches, no blood, no wrecked furniture. The cabin looked untouched, like nothing ever happened. Even the message on the wall, gone. Katie was questioned over and over. They thought it was trauma, stress, hallucination. But Natalie said the same thing. Every detail matched. Josh, he never spoke again. He was taken to a facility. He just stares at the wall now. Katie, she changed after that. She doesn't laugh the way she used to. She won't go near forests. She doesn't sleep well. Sometimes she wakes up screaming, and the weirdest part? Last spring, she got a postcard. No return address. All it said was, "Spring is back." So yeah, that's the story I had to tell you. Believe it or not. But when spring break comes, and if you're planning a trip somewhere remote, just make sure you're not disturbing something that's been waiting in the silence. Because not everything wants to stay asleep forever. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Ethan during spring break 2 years ago. I'm going to tell you exactly what he told me, and I swear, I've never seen him so serious before. This isn't one of those "we went camping and got scared" stories. This one, it's different. And once you hear it, you'll never look at spring break the same way again. Ethan was always into photography. Not the kind where you just take selfies for Instagram. He loved real photography. Landscapes, abandoned places, weird stuff. So for spring break, instead of hitting the beach with the rest of us, he decided to take a solo trip out west. Somewhere in Arizona, near the desert, where he'd heard about an old mining town that had been abandoned since the 1800s. Most people didn't even know where it was. He found it through an old blog post by another photographer who claimed it was haunted by silence. That's what caught Ethan's attention. Haunted by silence. He was hooked. He packed his camera gear, rented a Jeep, and drove out into the desert. He told me the last town he passed through was nothing more than a gas station and 2 houses. After that, it was just open land, dirt roads, cacti, heat, and silence. He finally found the old mining town just as the sun was setting. It wasn't on any GPS, just a few crumbling buildings, an old saloon, a church, and about 6 houses. No roofs, no glass in the windows, everything dry and dusty. But Ethan said it was beautiful in its own way. He got out, took photos, walked through the town. As the sun dipped behind the hills, he decided to stay overnight. He had brought a tent and supplies, and the sky was so clear he could see 1,000,000 stars. He thought it would be peaceful, but here's where things started to turn. Around midnight, he was reviewing his photos inside his tent when he heard footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps. Not animal sounds. Not the wind. Human footsteps, crunching. The dry dirt outside. He froze. Then a voice, low and distant, called out, "Hello?" He unzipped the tent slowly and stepped out with his flashlight. No one was there. He called out, thinking maybe someone else had come to explore, but no answer. He walked through the ghost town with just his light. Everything was dead quiet. That's when he noticed something strange. The door to the church was swinging open, even though there hadn't been any wind all night. He approached it. The flashlight started flickering. He thought maybe the batteries were low, but he'd just put in fresh ones that morning. Still, he pushed the door open. Inside, it looked like any old church, except there was something weird about the walls. They were covered in scratches, deep, angry-looking lines like claws had scraped along the wood again and again. And then he saw something that made his heart stop. There was a photo, a printed photo, lying right there on the dusty floor near the altar. He picked it up. It was a photo of him, taken earlier that day, from behind. It showed him walking toward the saloon. He hadn't printed that photo. He hadn't even uploaded it anywhere, and he was alone. He said his whole body turned cold. He ran back to his tent, grabbed his gear, and packed up. He didn't care that it was the middle of the night. He didn't care about the photos anymore. He just wanted to leave. But when he got in his Jeep and tried to start it, nothing. The engine was dead. Not even a click. He tried again and again, but the car wouldn't start. Then his phone battery died. It had been at 70% just minutes before. Now he was stuck in the middle of the desert, in a ghost town, at night. And he wasn't alone. He told me that's when the whispering began. At first, it was faint. Just one voice. Then more. Dozens. All around him. But when he looked out the windows, he saw nothing. He locked the doors. He sat in the Jeep and held his camera like it was a weapon. The whispering went on for what felt like hours. At some point, he must have fallen asleep because when he opened his eyes, the sun was rising. Everything was silent again. He got out and checked the Jeep. It started, just like that. No problems, like nothing had happened. He didn't waste a second. He drove out of there as fast as he could, but the story doesn't end there. When he got home and loaded his photos onto his laptop, he noticed something terrifying. There were pictures he didn't take, between the ones he remembered of the sunset, the town, the church. There were new photos, photos of him, sleeping inside the Jeep, photos taken from right outside the window. In one of them, he swears there's a figure in the reflection. It's tall, thin, with a face that doesn't look human. More like stretched skin, hollow eyes, and a mouth too wide. He deleted the photos immediately, but the next morning, they were back, reappeared in his camera folder, like something wanted him to see them. He threw out the memory card, got a new phone, switched laptops. But sometimes when he's alone, he hears the whispering again. He says it's soft, like it's coming from the corner of the room even if no one's there. And once, just a few weeks ago, he found another photo on his kitchen table. It was old, black and white. It showed the inside of that same church. But in the back, near the door, was a figure holding a camera. Ethan swears it looks just like him. Only the clothes are from a different time, like the 1800s. So now he keeps all the lights on at night. He doesn't go out alone anymore. And he never, ever takes solo trips for spring break. He said something, followed him back from that ghost town, and maybe it never really left. So if you ever feel like going off the grid for some peace and quiet, just remember, some places are silent for a reason. And sometimes, silence doesn't mean empty. It means something is watching and waiting. This is the story of my friend Jenna, and what happened to her during a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains. I've never seen her so shaken before. I'm not kidding when I tell you this. Whatever happened to her up there, it changed her. It's still hard for me to even think about it without getting chills, and I'm telling you this for a reason. You should never, ever go to a cabin in the mountains alone, especially if it's surrounded by dense woods. Jenna had always been the adventurous type. She loved hiking, camping, and being out in nature. So when she heard about this small, secluded cabin up in the mountains, she jumped at the chance to book it for a weekend getaway. The cabin was way off the beaten path. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just woods and peace. It sounded perfect for someone like her, who craved solitude and wanted to disconnect from everything. She packed her bags, grabbed her hiking boots, and headed up to the mountains on Friday afternoon. The drive there wasn't easy. The roads were narrow, winding, and a little rough, but she didn't mind. She loved being in the middle of nowhere. The farther from civilization, the better. When she finally reached the cabin, it was exactly how she'd imagined it. Small, rustic, with a stone fireplace, wooden floors, and large windows that opened up to a breathtaking view of the forest. She was alone, and the only sound she could hear was the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. That evening, after a hike through the forest, Jenna sat down on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. It was peaceful, serene. Nothing could have prepared her for what would happen next. As dusk settled into night, she decided to head inside. The air had grown cold, and she wanted to light a fire in the cabin. She'd barely stepped inside when she heard a knock at the door. Now, mind you, there wasn't supposed to be anyone around for miles. The cabin was isolated. Jenna thought maybe it was someone who had gotten lost or needed help, but when she opened the door, there was no one there. just the dark woods stretching out in front of her. She shrugged it off. Maybe someone had been passing by on a trail. She closed the door and locked it, but the knocking didn't stop. It started again, louder this time, and it was coming from the back of the cabin. This freaked her out. Jenna wasn't the type to get scared easily, but something about this didn't feel right. She grabbed a flashlight and went to check. Outside, the air was cold and the wind had picked up. She shined the light around the back of the cabin, but she didn't see anyone. Just the trees, the dark shadows stretching across the ground. She turned to head back inside, but then something caught her eye. There, near the edge of the forest, she saw a figure standing still between the trees. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, too thin. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring at her. Jenna froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what to do. The figure didn't make a sound. It was like it was waiting for her to approach, but she didn't move. She just stood there, flashlight trembling in her hand. Then, without warning, the figure turned and vanished into the trees, disappearing so fast that Jenna wasn't sure if it had even been real. She ran inside, locked the doors, and sat by the fire. Her mind raced. Maybe it was just an animal. Maybe it was her imagination. But something told her it wasn't either of those things. The rest of the night was quiet. Jenna tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over her, but it was hard. She didn't sleep much, and every little creak and groan of the cabin seemed amplified. She kept hearing things, sounds she couldn't explain. Whispers, soft footsteps, the faint sound of something scraping against the wood. The next morning, Jenna woke up early and decided to go for a long hike to clear her mind. She wasn't about to let one weird encounter ruin her trip. The mountain trail was beautiful, and the further she walked, the more she began to calm down. But as she wandered deeper into the woods, she began to feel like she wasn't alone. At first, she brushed it off as the usual forest sounds, birds, squirrels, the wind rustling the leaves. But then, she heard footsteps. Someone walking behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. She stood still for a moment, listening. The footsteps stopped. Everything was silent again. Jenna didn't know what to think. Her heart started to race. She turned and hurried back to the cabin, trying not to let the panic take hold of her. When she returned to the cabin, she found something strange. The front door was open. She was sure she had locked it before leaving. Inside, everything seemed normal. But as she walked through the living room, she noticed something else. Her things had been moved. Her backpack was on the floor, not where she had left it. A few books were out of place, and the strange part? The floorboards creaked, like someone had been walking around while she was gone. Jenna didn't stay long enough to figure it out. She grabbed her things, rushed out of the cabin, and drove down the mountain. She didn't stop until she reached the nearest town, where she called her friend Alex and told her everything. Now here's the thing. I believe Jenna. I know her, and I know she's not the kind of person to make up stuff like this. But when she went back to the cabin to get her stuff a few days later, it was gone. The cabin was completely abandoned, like no one had ever stayed there. And the weirdest part? No one knew about it. No one could find any record of it existing. The road to the cabin, completely overgrown, no trail, no sign. It was like it had never been there. So here's the lesson. Don't go looking for isolated places, especially if they don't seem to exist on any map. There's a reason some places are forgotten. Some places are meant to be left alone. And sometimes, when you think you're alone in the woods, you might not be. You might just be sharing the space with something that's been waiting for you to get lost. This is the story of a guy named Luke, a friend of mine, who went on a camping trip a few months ago that he'll never forget. I've heard some pretty wild stories, but when he told me this one, I could tell he wasn't just playing around. Whatever happened to him out there, it wasn't normal. It all started when Luke decided to take a weekend trip by himself. He'd been working non-stop and needed to get away from everything. The stress, the noise, the people. So he found a remote campsite in the woods, deep in the mountains, not far from a small town. It wasn't a place where many people went. In fact, when he researched it online, he found almost no reviews. It seemed perfect. Luke didn't mind being alone. He loved hiking, nature, and being in the wild. He even enjoyed the peace that came with being away from all the distractions of life. The first day, he set up his tent and started hiking the trails that wound through the dense forest. The weather was perfect, clear skies, a light breeze, the smell of pine in the air. He felt good. He felt free. But that night, things started to feel off. He made himself dinner over a small campfire and sat quietly, watching the flames dance. But then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness began to settle in, he heard something. At first it was faint, just a rustling in the trees. He thought it might be an animal, maybe a raccoon or a deer moving through the underbrush. But then it came again and again. Louder. Closer. Luke stood up and looked around, but all he could see was the blackness of the forest. He listened. The sound wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from all around him, scratching, scraping, like something was moving through the trees, circling him. His heart started to race. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself it was just an animal, but then he heard it, a voice, soft, barely a whisper. It sounded like it was coming from the trees. Help. Me. Luke froze. He wasn't sure if he had imagined it, but the voice sounded so real. It was almost a whisper, but it was clear enough for him to make out the words. Help me. He grabbed his flashlight, pointed it toward the sound, but all he saw was the dark outline of trees swaying in the wind. No one was there. He chalked it up to being paranoid. Maybe he was just tired from the hike. He went back to his campfire and tried to focus on the crackling flames. But then the whispering started again. Closer now. Please. Help me. Luke stood up, shining his light all around. The air felt heavier, colder, like something had changed. There was a presence in the air that he couldn't explain. It was like the forest itself was alive, watching him. He stepped back toward his tent, thinking maybe he should just call it a night. That's when the ground shifted beneath his feet. It wasn't an earthquake or anything like that. It was more like a tremor, like the ground had become soft, almost spongy, and then solid again. Luke felt a wave of unease wash over him. He froze. His flashlight flickered, and for a brief second, he thought he saw something just outside the edge of the light, a shadow. tall, thin, and moving fast, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. He didn't know what to think. He figured it had to be his mind playing tricks on him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The whole forest felt wrong. Eventually, he decided to call it a night. He zipped himself into his tent, trying to convince himself that he was just being paranoid. The sounds of the forest outside, the wind rustling the leaves, the occasional snap of a twig, helped him fall asleep. But his dreams weren't much better. He dreamed he was running through the woods, and no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't escape. He heard the whispering again. "Help me!" But it wasn't coming from the trees anymore. It was inside his head, over and over. He woke up with a start, drenched in sweat. His heart was racing. It was still dark outside, but the forest was dead quiet. No wind, no rustling leaves, just silence. He lay in his tent trying to catch his breath. That's when he heard it again. A knock, soft but distinct. 3 knocks, one after the other. His blood ran cold. He was sure the knocks had come from outside his tent. Not from the trees, but from somewhere else. He sat up, holding his breath. His flashlight was on the ground beside him, and he could feel it calling to him. But he didn't want to move. He didn't want to look, because something inside him told him that if he looked, he'd see something he wasn't supposed to. The knocks came again. This time, Luke grabbed the flashlight and unzipped his tent slowly. He peeked out, heart pounding in his chest. But there was nothing. The forest was still. No wind, no sounds, only darkness. He stepped outside, his flashlight sweeping across the area. There was no one there, no animals, no people. But the silence felt oppressive, like something was just out of sight, waiting for him to slip up. He couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his gear and packed up as fast as he could. He didn't even bother with breakfast. He just wanted out of there. But when he reached his Jeep, he noticed something strange. His tires had been slashed. Not just one, but all 4. The knife-like slashes were deep, and the air around him felt thick with tension. Panic surged through him. Luke quickly got in the Jeep, trying to start it, but it was no use. The engine wouldn't turn over. That's when he heard the voice again, louder this time. "Help me!" He slammed the car door shut, locked it, and looked around. The trees seemed to be closing in on him. There was nowhere to run. And then, just as he thought he was going to lose it, the forest went quiet again. The whispering stopped. The knocking stopped. Everything just stopped. Luke never got to find out what happened. Somehow, by some miracle, he managed to start his Jeep after a few tries, and he drove out of there as fast as he could. He didn't look back. When he got to town, he tried to tell someone about it, but the locals just stared at him like he was crazy. The forest, the campsite, it didn't exist anymore. No one had ever heard of it. The road was gone, blocked off by fallen trees, and the land was overgrown. Luke never went back into those woods, and he hasn't been camping since, so if you ever hear a whisper in the trees or a knock on your tent at night, get out. Because some places, some forests, are meant to be left alone. And if something wants your help, it might be a little too late to turn around. This is the story of a road trip that went horribly wrong. My friend Sarah She'll tell you she had the best intentions, but sometimes the best intentions can take you down a path you're better off never walking. It all started with a long weekend getaway. She'd been working long hours at her job in the city and decided she needed a break, some fresh air. So, she planned this road trip to a little town in the mountains. Quiet, peaceful, off the beaten path. The kind of place you can escape to when you just need some time to yourself. It sounded perfect. Sarah mapped out her route and set off on a Friday afternoon. She was excited. She packed her car with snacks, her favorite playlist, and a few good books. The drive was about 5 hours, so she expected to get there around evening time. As the sun began to set, she found herself driving deeper into the mountains, her GPS guiding her along a winding road that twisted through dense forest. Air outside was growing cooler, and the trees were so thick they almost seemed to swallow up the light. At first, it was peaceful, just her and the road, and the occasional rustle of leaves. But then the road became narrower. The pavement turned to gravel. The trees seemed to close in on her, and the air grew heavier. It wasn't just the weather. There was a strange, unsettling feeling that started to creep up her spine. She tried to ignore it. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from the long drive. But then the car ahead of her took a sharp turn and vanished from sight. And that's when Sarah noticed something strange. There was no one else on the road. She glanced in her rearview mirror. Nothing. The road behind her was empty. That's when the first unsettling thought hit her. Had she missed a turn somewhere? The GPS hadn't warned her. She wasn't sure where she was anymore. She checked her phone for signal, but of course there was nothing. No bars, no service. Panic started to creep in, but she kept driving, hoping that she'd find a sign of life, a house, a gas station, anything. It wasn't long before the sky turned fully dark, and that's when the first sound broke the silence. A faint tapping. It was almost like a knock, but it was too rhythmic, too precise, as if it was coming from somewhere outside her car. She turned her head to look out the side window, but all she could see was the thick blackness of the woods. The tapping continued. Her eyes darted back and forth between the rearview mirror and the side window. It was like something, or someone, was just outside of her view, watching her. She couldn't explain it, but the tapping was unmistakable. It was coming from the car, not from the windows, though. The sound seemed to be coming from underneath the car. She slammed on the brakes and pulled to the side of the road, her hands shaking. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped out, shining it around the car. The gravel crunched under her boots, but the tapping stopped the moment she opened the door. The woods were eerily quiet again. She didn't know whether to be relieved or more terrified. The beam of light swept across the undercarriage of the car, and that's when she saw it. There, caught in the undercarriage, was something. A small, twisted piece of metal. Something sharp, like a wire, tangled in the undercarriage. She knelt down, trying to get a better look, but the moment she touched it, the tapping started again. Her heart raced. Her breath came in quick gasps. That's when she heard the footsteps. They weren't far away. Just beyond the tree line, someone was walking, slowly, methodically, as though they knew she was watching. Sarah's flashlight swept back toward the woods. She called out, but there was no answer. The footsteps continued, growing louder, closer. She stood up, panic rising in her chest. Without thinking, she bolted back into the car, locked the doors, and tried to start the engine. Nothing. The car wouldn't start. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. The tapping beneath the car never stopped. It was driving her mad. Suddenly, she saw it. Through the trees. A figure. A man. He was tall, too tall to be human, and he was standing still, just staring at her. His face was obscured by the darkness, but she could feel his eyes on her, cold and empty. Panic surged through her. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, but the car sputtered and died again. She banged her fist on the wheel in frustration. That's when she heard it. The voice. It came from behind her, right next to her ear. A whisper, so quiet she could barely hear it. "Help me." It was low, soft, but unmistakable. She froze, unable to move. It was like the voice was coming from inside the car, but there was no one there. No one in the back seat, no one outside. Just the sound of her own breath. She turned, her eyes wide, and that's when the flashlight flickered. The beam danced across the trees, the figure still standing there, watching her. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her whole body trembling. She didn't know how much longer she could take it. But then, the whisper came again. Louder this. "Time, help me." And just like that, the car started. The engine roared to life. Sarah didn't hesitate. She slammed the car into drive and sped down the road, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. She didn't know what she'd seen back there, or who, or what that thing was. She just knew she had to get out of there fast. She drove for what felt like hours, only stopping when she reached the first sign of civilization, a small gas station, bright lights cutting through the darkness. She pulled into the lot, her hands still trembling, and parked her car. She stayed there for a long time, just breathing, trying to calm herself down. When she finally walked inside, she went straight to the cashier. She told him her story about the tapping, the figure, the voice. The cashier just looked at her with a blank expression. "You're not the first," he said, his voice low. "It happens to a lot of people. That road's cursed." "Cursed?" she asked, shaking her head. "The road you were on," he continued, "it wasn't always there. There's a part of the forest up there that doesn't want people to leave. Some say it's the spirits of those who've disappeared." Sarah's blood ran cold. She never went back to that road again, and to this day, she won't talk about it without getting visibly shaken. I don't know what happened to her on that road that night. But I do know one thing. Some places, no matter how empty they seem, are never really empty. There's something in the darkness that waits for you to wander too far. And once you do, it doesn't let you go.